Hey guys, so I read The Stand. This is my version. This is 817 pages. This was originally printed back in 1980. The other copy, which I borrowed from the library just to show you the difference, was published back in 1990. It's the uncut, I mean, it's still kind of cut a little bit, but this is like the preferred author's edition. He ended up adding a bunch of stuff, and but I mean, it's really just character development and stuff like that. Stephen King's his own editor, so he cut out about 350 pages from this one to make this one. You can kind of tell the difference there. And this copy was done back in 1990, and they modernized a few things. So as he was editing it and re-releasing it, he added the dates are different. So this most everything's set in 1985. This is most everything set in the mid 90s. And so there's a little bit of a difference. Eventually I'm going to go back and I'm going to read this one. I'll put them up right here so you can see them. Scoot over a water bottle. I really enjoyed it. Wow, there is a big difference in size. But it was one of those stories where, as always with Stephen King, I find myself going, man, this guy can write great characters. I don't always love his plot choices and the things he does with his characters, but the way that he creates them and crafts them, they feel like real people. And this is very much the same. Main characters here, we followed a bunch of people. We've got Stu Redman, Fran Goldsmith, Larry Underwood, Nick Andros, Randall Flagg, Lloyd Henreid, and the Trash Can Man. And then you get a little bit of Mother Abigail and a few other characters. You get Nadine's perspective. You get Harold's perspective. You get Tom Cullen's perspective for a little bit. A bunch of other side characters that you get their perspective. But it's just a great story about... Sorry, I got a squeaky chair. It's a great story about how we would deal with a pandemic. And I decided... I've been wanting to read it, and then I was like, you know what? I'm going to read it in April. And I didn't read it in April. And then I started it in May, and then finally finished it in June. It's a big book. But... man, it was good. It was a really, really good story. Let me describe it to you. Initially, we open up, and there's a guy, and he's running away from something. We don't know exactly what he's running away from. Kind of come to find out, he's running away from a super flu. A super flu. They eventually name Captain Trips. Captain Trips has a 99% mortality rate. It was created in a lab, but it's basically the flu. And there's a few people who are immune to it, and those people are the people we follow. I don't believe we follow anybody who is not immune. Everybody we follow, I think, is immune. So Stephen King got the idea for this after moving to Boulder, and he was watching some of those documentaries where they were setting off nuclear bombs in the desert out in Nevada and California. And he wanted to find like a world-ending disease or like biochemical weapon. And after talking to some people, some like scientists, they said, look, just do the flu. The flu is pretty deadly as it is, and if we turned it into a super flu, it could kill 99% of the people like you're talking about. And man, he starts it in a way that I really appreciate. You kind of just get an idea of who people are. Like, they're living their lives normally. They're in these normal situations. And then it unravels. You get some page time where all of a sudden, these people aren't just, all right, everybody died, welcome to the story. It's kind of like you get to learn who, like my favorite character, Larry Underwood. He just created a song, like the most popular song out there. Like, he hit a #1 hit, and it was everywhere. And then the pandemic starts. So he had made some bad decisions. He goes to visit his mom in New York. He's all the way in LA. Goes to visit his mom in New York, and when the flu hits, he's stuck in New York. You've got Stu, who's from Texas, and ends up in Atlanta and then New Hampshire. And then you've got Fran, who's from Maine, because you can't have a Stephen King story without being in Maine, right? Where's everybody? Nick is in Arkansas. Nick Andros. He's a deaf mute, and he's a really great character. He's like the heart of the whole book. I like Nick a lot. Where Fran? Okay, we got Fran, Nick, Larry. Trash Can Man is just outside of Gary, Indiana. He's in a small town outside of Gary, Indiana, not far from Chicago, and he starts his journey there. Trash Can Man is actually he was when he was a kid he was setting fires in trash cans, and after the flu he just dropped his regular name and said, "I'll just be Trash Can Man." A lot of people calls him Trash or whatever. Lloyd was a small time criminal out in Arizona, I believe, and he gets incarcerated right as the flu happens, and he has to figure out his life stuck in prison when everybody around him is dying. And then Randall Flagg is your big bad guy. You kind of get the idea that he is the darkness behind all the evil in the world. Kind of the way It kind of had, like, Pennywise was the evil in the town of Derry. Randall Flagg is the evil in this part of the world. And with King's interconnected stories, I'd love to do a breakdown of that one day. If I ever do, I'll tag it here. But Randall Flagg is the most common character in all of his stories. He's very prominent in the Dark Tower series, from what I've heard. And any RF is Randall Flagg, kind of in his story. He morphs into different people. He can look differently. He can be different people. But generally, that's who he is, right? I mean, there's not much really more to say about what the premise of the story is, but it's such a great breakdown on prophecy, a great breakdown on what we would do when government collapsed, what the good people would do and what the bad people would do. It's a great story that breaks down the idea of how are we going to try to rebuild? What are we going to do? What's our plan of action? And then there's a very big supernatural element to it as well, where they're all having shared dreams. The people that go to follow Randall Flagg, they have a set of dreams, and the people that follow Mother Abigail have a set of dreams. And Mother Abigail is one of the coolest characters. She's from Nebraska. She's a 112-year-old black woman. In the miniseries, she's 108. So I almost said 108 there, but she's actually 112 in the book. And she's been living in Hemingford Home, Nebraska, and she basically is collecting all of them. Her faith in Jesus is the determining factor, and she's seeing them all in her dreams, and she's like, "Come on, baby, come to me, I got you." And then they all go together to Colorado, and it's that big journey that they take, and there's stumbling blocks and people that they meet along the way. It's really, really cool. The one thing that I've been told I need to read this one for was there's a moment between Trash Can Man and the kid. That's really the only thing that I'm definitely missing out on. There's like a big interaction there. But for the most part, this version, which I loved it because, number one, I found it for like $2, and then it has a really cool cover. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a raven in front of his eye as well. That's Randall Flagg. And there's some things about Randall Flagg that makes that a lot more clear if you've read the book, why the raven is important. But with the raven kind of sitting here and him sitting, like, just the ominousness of the mountainous background, because what they kind of do is the evil is set up on the west, and then the good is set over in Boulder, Colorado. So the Rocky Mountains are what separates them from one another. And basically everybody's collecting to these areas, and where they're trying to rebuild society. There's a lot of that rebuilding of society trope, which is fun. And then I love a good journey story. So Fran and them, they have to come all the way from Maine all the way to Boulder, Colorado, and that's a fun journey to go through. Larry comes from New York. Stu, when he starts his journey, he's up in New Hampshire at that point. Who else? Nick's in Arkansas, so his is a little bit shorter. So really cool. All the characters, I found myself understanding their motives, understanding why they were doing the things they were. One complaint that I have is that one of the bad characters is a fan of fantasy and science fiction books. And then Randall Flagg, one of his names when he's in Georgia, being a white supremacist, his name is Ramsey, and I didn't like that either. But other than that, the book was great. Because Randall Flagg changed his names. That's why he had, what was it? In some places, he's an anarchist. Some places, he's a Black Panther member. Some places, he's a white supremacist. He's just anywhere that there's evil, he was there. That's kind of his stick. So in Georgia, when he was a white supremacist, his name was Ramsey, and I was like, man, why did I gotta do that? Um, if you didn't know, my name's Ramsey. That's why I don't like that. I would suggest you read it. It's a fun story. It's big, especially if you get the extended version. This version is a little bit easier to get to, but they're harder to find. Um, what I would do if I were you is I'd read this one, and then if you really digged it and loved it and you wanted to read it again, I'd go to this one, because this one's definitely easier to ingest. 800 pages compared to like almost 1,200 pages, definitely easier. And right now I'm about halfway through the mini series that they did back in 1994. You can currently find it on YouTube. Just Google the Stand mini series, and it'll pull right up, and you can watch it. I mean, there's commercials and stuff or ads, YouTube ads, but it's pretty good. They've combined a couple characters, which I figured they would, but some of the characters they combined I didn't like. Um, Mainly Nadine and Rita for Larry's storyline. And Rita's very important to Larry, and that's a big part of his story arc and what he's going through. So when you combine Nadine and Rita, it kind of takes that significance away from his relationship with Rita and his relationship with Nadine. And I didn't like that. But other than that, I enjoyed it so far. I'm about halfway through. So Trash Can Man's pretty funny. Lloyd's pretty good. Randall Flagg, he's got a jean jacket and a mullet. I like it. Stu Redman is played by Gary Sinise, which, if you're a fan of Lieutenant Dan, you're a fan of him. Fran is, what's her name? Molly Ringwald from 16 Candles. I don't know. I've never seen Larry Underwood. And then Nick Andros is Rob Lowe. So a lot of characters that have become big TV stars after that. But it's really enjoyable. I would suggest you try it. And I would suggest you try The Stand. I know I'm probably just rambling here, but I really enjoyed the whole book. I don't want to spoil it for you. I may do a breakdown on it later, but I mean, there's not a lot to break down. It's just really learning about these people and the way that they travel through the world. And I understand why a lot of people call it his best book. I don't know if I'd call it his best book. It was amazing, and 11/22/63, all three of those are top quality books that he's written. Three very different books, but three books that I immensely enjoyed, written by Stephen King. So I'm a fan. I didn't know I was a fan until I started this YouTube channel, but figured I'd broaden my horizons, and I'm enjoying the heck out of Stephen King's work, and I'd love to read some more of it. So talk to you guys later. Subscribe if you want, and Discord link and Twitter link if you want. Goodreads too. I got a bunch of stuff you can follow or join in or be part of.